60s, early 70s, I had just found a guitar that someone left in my apartment. I'd never had a lesson. I was a sax player and a drummer, and I just moved to L.A. and I couldn't get any work. I was an unknown quantity in the jazz world there, and I had a few gigs. They're called casuals, which means you work for absolute minimum scale, usually 4 sets a night, someplace where people are eating and not listening, and it's educational. But I'd done some of that in Texas. You know, I was playing drums with a little quartet of guys. I think the youngest guy besides me in the band was 39, and I was 15. Mm-hmm. So I'd had some experience with that dynamic, you know, and I just wasn't getting any work in L.A. And also there was a real interest in this sort of interface between rock and roll music and this kind of hippie country music that was coming of age then, you know, and I actually think the wrong people get credit for it all the time. I must have seen 5 articles in the last 2 years that called me architect of Southern California country rock, and it actually began quite a while before me. I think the first country rock band was Ricky Nelson.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was killer stuff. Mm-hmm. Killer stuff. Great players. James Burton was on those sessions, and Glenn D. Harden. It was just great stuff. And then Rick was sort of not heard from so much for a while, and then he put together the Stone Canyon Band, which was even before Poco or the Burrito Brothers, and that was a great band. Mm-hmm. And Meisner was in that band, in fact. Randy Meisner was in that band. And they played really good driving country rock music before I think any of us had really thought of it. And also Dillard and Clark, very important group. As a matter of fact, I think Glenn Frey and I, when we had our little band before the Eagles, I think we memorized every note on the Dillard and Clark album, Through the Morning, Through the Night, because we used to do a couple of songs from that album. And then the Byrds were getting hip to country music, and especially as the personnel changed in the Byrds.
Yeah. Now, you started off, you were opening for the Byrds on Sunset Boulevard, right, with Long Branch Penny Whistle?
No, we opened for our first paying gig was at the Troubadour, other than a pass-the-hat kind of tiny folk club, was opening for Poco at the Troubadour.
Okay.
And I think the next week, or maybe the week after that, we opened for the Burrito Brothers. So we got a real dose of superb country rock. I mean, Poco blew us away, frankly, just because, you know, we were aware of CSN. I mean, I think they added the third harmony to pop music. It had been around in bluegrass forever, you know.
But they brought the focus to the West Coast, and
they made
that sound happen. Yeah.
And, you know, Graham Nash will tell you in a heartbeat that he sort of acquired his skills at that high harmony part, putting a third on Everly Brothers records, putting a third part, you know.
Nice place to start.
Yeah, and then when we heard Poco, and they had 4-part harmony.
Yeah.
And Glenn and I just thought, wow, that's the ticket.
There's a reunion tape.
That's big. And to me, it was almost like vocal goes big band. You know, I just heard more notes and more opportunities to make different intervals, and then we saw we spent a week opening for them, and then we spent a week opening for the Burrito Brothers, who were quite the opposite, really sloppy. And, you know, Graham was just a mess, but they were really bold. I mean, they were really onto something, and they'd been around all these country clubs with this kind of long-haired,
sort of a punk country thing.
Yeah, they were like hippie punk country guys, you know, and they were not always so well received in some of these country clubs, but they were really developing an audience, and I thought they were a very bold band, and I liked what they were doing. But that whole year at the Troubadour that was our university. Glenn and I were both college dropouts, and that was our school, because every major songwriter that I can think of for the next 20 to 30 years, up to including now, come to think of it, because Carol and James are out right now. But that year of 69, I think everybody that I liked as a songwriter, except the standard guys, played at the Troubadour. Neil Young played, Joni Mitchell played, Laura Nyro played, and completely destroyed everybody's head. She was the most amazing thing anyone had seen.
Yeah.
Tim Hardin played. Elton John played, Carole King played, Christopherson played, James played, Rick Nelson brought his band there. It was just Donny Hathaway played because Doug would book good jazz acts too in there sometimes, and it was really a phenomenal year of learning. And then at the end of that summer, CSNY played their first gig together at the Greek Theater. It's just like, it was like, wow, this is we're on to something. We're in
you
a
began
musical.
to write out of that sort of consciousness now?
A little before that, but I had a guitar, and it's awfully hard to carry a piano around on the back of a Triumph, and drums are just not really the essential instrument for a songwriter unless you have a partner that's doing, chords and melody or something like that. Yeah. So. And I was fascinated with this thing you could just pick up and carry around, this box, And I had already been, a Django fan and a Charlie Christian fan, and a lot of really great guitar players, Wes Montgomery, and
there really is that interesting chord that always comes up in your songs. It just goes someplace else.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what attracted so many people to interpreting your songs.
I guess. I don't know. I guess. I mean, sometimes I was not able to really sell people on the odd chord, so I'd build it in the harmonies. But actually, Glenn and Don were fairly receptive. Glenn pretty much so, because Glenn was really an R&B freak. He's from Detroit, Ann Arbor, actually, where I'm going tomorrow. And he knew every Motown record and every song, every change. He knew all the Philadelphia records, all the Gamble and Huff records. And he was just a compendium of R&B changes and tricks and grooves, and between what he was doing and what I brought to it and what Henley brought to it, we were just a real good mix of writers. And when Jackson was there, it was even better. We had we had four very distinctly different guys with completely different influences. Although Jackson's dad was a jazz piano player.